While the motoring press may have wanted Peugeot's 208 GTi to be a raw, uncompromising hot hatch, the French brand has instead gone its own way and brought us something that, though still huge fun, is actually quite a bit more sophisticated than that. A car for people who might remember this model's iconic 205 GTi 80s predecessor, but these days want something that doesn't put them through the ringer in delivering its best, something a bit more grown up. It's a class act.
It seems it's impossible to consider a verdict on Peugeot's 208 GTi without harking back to its legendary predecessor, the 205 GTi we first saw in 1984. Contemporary hot hatch road tests lament the fact that, in contrast to that iconic car, modern shopping rockets are too fat, too grippy and too safe. Road testers getting all dewy-eyed as they reminisce about the time they entered a beet field backwards at 85 miles an hour in a 205. The nostalgia of being out of control, surrounded by metal with all the structural integrity of a Sprite can. Nope, I'll take a modern hot hatch any day and put up with a little less mid-corner throttle adjustability in exchange for things like air conditioning, a decent stereo, turbocharged grunt, seats that fit, an engine that can cover big mileages without issue, and a dashboard that doesn't twitter like a queue at a One Direction gig. I'm silly like that. So, though I'll accept that some potential 208 GTi buyers may have had a 205 GTi on their bedroom wall as kids, I'm also as sure as Peugeot was at the launch of this car in the spring of 2013 that these people now want something better built, more comfortable and safer, while still delivering excitement when they want it. That last bit is important and very much defines what this car is all about. You might well be able to buy faster hot hatches, and you can certainly buy ones that deliver a bigger adrenaline rush. But this 208 is a car very much designed to respond to your moods, rather than constantly imposing its personality upon you. If you've grown out of being dictated to, you're probably going to like that a lot. Join me and I'll show you what I mean. So, what's it like? Well, Peugeot certainly hasn't skimped when it comes to the hot hatch mood music. Jump in and you get this tiny steering wheel with its chunky rim and contrast stitching, these figure-hugging seats, an aluminium pedal and gear lever, and more black and red than you can shake a stick at. Other parts of the car are resolutely traditional. In contrast to some rivals, there's no faddy starter button to press, no fiddly electronic handbrake to worry about, and no flappy paddled gearbox to get to grips with. This means that you feel at home with the 208 right from the get-go. Key the engine, and despite what's described as a sports exhaust, there's a notable lack of oral drama. Though plenty of visual compensation as the instrument needles glow white, then swing through their full scale and back. The numbers illuminate, and a pair of red LED rings around each clock spring to life. You ready? Once on the road though, this feels nothing like the car the racing trimming leads you to expect. The steering is light and the ride quality is actually quite cosseting in its own expensive feeling way. And in place of the kind of peaky performance engine that you might think would characterize any self-respecting hot hatch, there's a turbo 1.6 with a lazy, long-legged feel that makes this Peugeot easy to punt around in when you're not in the mood to flog the thing to death. As a result, the 208 GTi makes a better city car than almost any little GTi I can think of. But hold on, this is supposed to be a sporty car, and I'm supposed to be driving it hard and telling you what that's like, which I'm going to do. It's just that right up front, you need to key into this model's personality to properly understand it. Here is a real-world approach to shopping rocket motoring, one realising that much as you might like your route to work to take in empty, cresting Welsh border back roads, it's actually more likely to be punctuated by traffic jams, potholes and urban misery. It's also an approach accepting that a performance car developed on a super smooth racetrack is often unlikely to be very good on a typical bumpy British country lane. So, while rival brands boast that their cars were developed with 100 or so laps around the Nürburgring Nordschleife, Peugeot's engineers are actually proud to tell us that they never bothered. Has that brought us the kind of compromised end result that some magazine testers have suggested is delivered when you really start to push this thing along? Personally, I don't think so. Let's start with motive power. The engine, a 200 PS version of the same award-winning 1598cc turbo unit you'll find in everything from a Mini Cooper S to top versions of Peugeot's own RCZ Super Coupe. Benign it may be at the lower reaches of the rev range, but plug into the meat of the power curve from about 2000 RPM upwards and you'll find this car quite able to match any of its direct hot hatch rivals punch for punch. There's 275 Newton meters of torque on offer, significantly more than you get in, say, a Renault Sport Clio 200. Quite enough muscle to pile on speed with real verve. 62 miles an hour from rest, flashing by in just 6.8 seconds en route to 143 miles an hour. And the more important 50 to 75 miles an hour fifth gear overtaking increment dispatched in just 7 seconds flat. It'd probably be a few tenths quicker still if it had the kind of twin clutch steering wheel paddle auto transmission that rival Renault, Seat, Volkswagen, Skoda and Audi hot hatch models insist on giving you. But the manual on offer here is a really strong box, albeit a bit long in the throw. Use the 6-speeder to its limits and you'll be able to plug the engine right into the good bit of the turbo action through each gear. To be honest, you'd appreciate all this performance a bit more if it was delivered with a bit more of a rasp and a crackle, the kind of thing you'd get from the rival Ford Fiesta ST's artificial sound symposer, or indeed the trick exhaust system used on Peugeot's own RCZ. But then the development team behind this car would probably counter that video game sound effects don't really fit with this 208's more mature image. I've already touched upon the way that character trait is emphasized by the supple ride quality, something that on a racetrack at higher speeds would deliver a little more float in the suspension than you'd find in a rival Renault Sport Clio or Ford Fiesta ST model. Through really tight corners, you might also miss the limited slip differential and or torque vectoring systems that rivals provide to better get the power down. Overall though, on public roads, unless you're travelling at the sorts of speeds that would get you an instant custodial, that becomes a non-issue. The Peugeot engineers having hit on a ride and handling compromise that works really well for most people most of the time. If you want the detail, we're talking higher rate springs, beefier dampers, a wider track and a chunkier anti-roll bar. But I think the development team will probably help most by the fact that the suspension has less work to do. This may be a bigger car than its 207 GTi predecessor, but it weighs in at 110 kilograms lighter. Can you feel the difference that makes? Absolutely. It's like dropping your 17-stone mate off at home and then driving back the same route. The beefy brakes seem more effective as they've less to stop, and the whole car feels sharper and more vivid than before. You brake later, turn in easier, and ride dips and crests with more composure. At which point you might find yourself with a few conflicting feelings over the steering, always a vital part of the hot hatch experience. No, it isn't quite as feelsome and responsive as some of the setups you'll find elsewhere. The electric assistance means there's no real feel of kickback, judder or torque steer coming back through the wheel, but then that can sometimes help when you're battling with the car on a really bumpy back road. Anyway, in compensation, there's plenty else to like. This small wheel rim delivering wrist flick responses. and maintaining the kind of pointy, direct feedback you want from a GTi of this kind. It doesn't feel as immediately connected to every grain of the road surface as you'd experience in, say, Fiesta ST, but there's real talent here. You just need to learn to put your trust in it. Overall, as I've been suggesting all along, there's a subtlety about this GTi that will be lost on some. It has facets and layers to its skill set, and in a shopping market that's all about the quick hit and the instant 1 minute pitch, there's something quite refreshing about that. A car manufacturer that credits its customers with some nous could be a risky tactic. List them, and the 208 GTi has all the requisite hot hatch design cues, but it's not the most instantly pugnacious of shapes. In fact, it's a bit like that movie where Elijah Wood starred as a knife-wielding football thug, all a bit too cuddly to take entirely seriously. There's a lower ride height and a wider track, plus the front end has come in for some styling budget with these halogen headlamps featuring LEDs for the directional indicators and daytime lighting. They're lights that frame a mesh grille with bright chrome inserts and what's claimed to be a 3D checkered flag effect. I'm having a tough time making that out, but full marks for effort. There are gently blistered wheel arches housing these good-looking 17-inch alloy wheels, while this chrome strip at the C-pillar tips the hat to the old 205 GTi, which, like this car, was only offered in 3-door form. The rear end is finished with a gloss black rear skirt, from which the exhaust emerges with a trapezoid chrome double tailpipe. Whichever colour you choose for your 208 GTi, there are always these red highlights, from the GTi quarter panel to the brake calipers, the grille lower bead, and in the Peugeot scripts on the tailgate and the grille. It's all neatly done, looks agreeably cohesive, but isn't going to unduly scare slower, more timid road users when you roar up in their rear view mirror. Maybe that's the point. Drop inside, easing yourself into the thickly bolstered Napa leather trimmed and red stitched sports seats, and you're greeted by the 208's trademark low and tiny steering wheel and relatively high seating position. Now, if you've not come across this layout before, the setup is that instead of peering through a big wheel at the instruments as you would normally do, you view the high mounted dial pack over the top of the red stitched leather trimmed rim of a much smaller wheel. It takes a bit of getting used to, and if you want to be able to see the dials, you need to lower the flat bottomed wheel so that it's almost brushing your thighs. So drivers who insist on assuming a semi-reclined straight arm driving position may find that the wheel rim obscures part of the instrument cluster. Most, though, will find a seating compromise that works, and once you've adjusted to the whole arrangement, you'll probably end up preferring it to something more conventional. Once you've got yourself comfortable, take a look around and you'll find that there's a lot going on here. I'm not sure that all of the decor works. The red fade to black on the door handle and on the centre console trim is questionable, and this aluminium detail on the dash top creates a nasty reflection on the windscreen. I'd also point out that while the aluminium gear knob looks nice, it's freezing to the touch in winter and boiling in the summer. Otherwise though, it's hard not to be impressed by the quality feel in the cabin, and there are plenty of lovely touches. The aluminium pedals, the red framed instrument cluster, and the stitched marker on the steering wheel to indicate the straight ahead position. Driver stuff. Button clutter's been kept to a minimum too, mainly thanks to the provision of what looks like a tablet PC attached to the fascia. This 7-inch multifunction colour infotainment touchscreen offers access to radio, Bluetooth phone functions, downloadable apps, plus most owners will want to pay a few £100 extra to add satellite navigation to it. If I'm honest, I'd have to say that the user interface isn't the most intuitive I've come across, particularly if you're trying to find your way through the complicated menus on the move. But like most of these things, after a few days of acclimatisation, you'll be flicking through the various screens without a second thought. You'd expect these bulky sports seats to leave rear seat passengers in this 3-door only model a bit squeezed for legroom, which is true, though I should point out that the longish wheelbase of this 208 means that back seat folk are better off than they would be in some other rivals. There's 50mm more legroom than, for example, you'd get in a rival Fiesta ST. Headroom for tall rear passengers isn't quite so impressive, especially if you've specified this Cielo panoramic glass roof. I'd want it though, for it makes what is quite a tight and dark rear seat a whole lot airier. The boot isn't a bad size. At 285 litres, a little less than you get in a rival Renault Sport Clio, it's true, but a pretty decent size compared to the 276 litres you get in a Fiesta ST and the 236 litres you're left with in a Seat Ibiza Cupra. It's a decently shaped cargo area too, with minimal intrusions and a fairly low loading lip. There's also a 60-40 split rear seat, though it doesn't fold quite flat. Still, if you do push it forward, there's a useful 1076 litres of fresh air to play with across a space wide enough to carry a lot more than you might expect. Pricing for this 208 GTi is pretty simple to get a handle on. There's only one 1.6 THP 200 PS turbo engine available, one conventional 6-speed manual transmission and one 3-door body style. You'll pay around £19,000, about £1,500 more than the next model down in the 208 range, the XY 1.6 THP, which has a detuned 156 PS version of the same 1.6 litre turbo engine. The amount being asked here might seem a fair chunk to splash out on a Super Mini based hatch, but is in line with what you'd pay for most of its key rivals. Now, it's quite hard to come up with cars that offer exactly the same philosophy as this 208 GTi. The magazines all compare this car to Renault Sport's Clio 200 EDC and Ford's Fiesta ST, pointing out that the Ford undercuts this Peugeot by a couple of thousand and the Renault offers paddle shift semi-automatic transmission and 5 doors for no more money. Now, that's not the whole story, of course. Equip the Ford to 208 GTi levels and there's not much in it. And as for 5 doors and auto transmission, well, I can't see too many potential hot hatch buyers wanting those things anyway. What does go down well in the showroom is a classy cabin, an area in which this Peugeot holds a big advantage. Even forgetting all of that though, I'd argue that the Renault and the Ford both appeal to a slightly different, more enthusiast-orientated hot hatch buyer, someone prepared to make a few more compromises for their fun. Even a Mini Cooper S, which has almost exactly the same engine on offer here and would only save you a few £100, isn't quite the all-round everyday package that this Peugeot promises to be, and is a lot more cramped inside. A closer choice, I think, would be Volkswagen's Polo GTi, but that's £500 pricier and comes only with a flappy paddle auto gearbox, an issue also afflicting cheaper but arguably less desirable hot hatch rivals like Seat's Ibiza Cupra and Skoda's Fabia VRS. So, if having considered all of this, you conclude that a 208 GTi is what you really want, what can you expect to get for your money in terms of equipment? A reasonable amount as it happens. Before it's necessary to start ticking options boxes, you get 17-inch alloy wheels, automatic lights and wipers, rear parking sensors, an ultrasonic alarm, cruise control, a trip computer, an electrochrome rear view mirror, half leather sports seats, dual zone air conditioning, and a multifunction infotainment touchscreen with a DAB digital radio, USB and 3.5mm jacks, Bluetooth compatibility and steering wheel controls. Peugeot hasn't gone lightweight on safety equipment either. You don't get hill start assist, but the GTi is fitted as standard with disengageable electronic stability control, 3 rear seat belts, twin front, side and full length curtain airbags, plus a speed alarm with speed limiter to take those sweaty palm moments out of average speed monitored sections on the motorways. The anti-lock brakes are backed up by electronic brake force distribution, and there's brake assist to aid in emergency stops that'll be advertised to following motorists by automatically activating rear hazard warning flashes. There's also ASR anti-skid regulation and CBC cornering brake control. Plus, you get a full-size spare wheel, so you're never going to be left stranded by the side of the road with a shredded tyre and one of those useless cans of mobility foam. On the subject of safety, you might also consider finding a little more for the Peugeot Connect SOS and assistance system. In the event of an accident, via this, you'll be able to call the emergency services who'll know exactly where you are from the vehicle's GPS signal. If you're incapacitated and unable to make that call, the vehicle will automatically do it for you, bringing immediate aid. In terms of other optional extras, well, Peugeot has a long list of tempters. I'd settle for metallic paint, the sat-nav upgrade and probably the Cielo panoramic glass roof, which together would add around £1,000 to the asking price. There are also roof decals that personalise the look, and I could also be tempted into spending more on the heated seats and a park assist option that steers you into tight spaces. Overall though, the 208 GTi is already one of the best equipped cars in its class, so you don't need to go too crazy here. If Peugeot ever feel a little beaten up by the enduring legacy of their iconic 205 GTi, then they might consider this. This 208 GTi is over a second quicker to 62 miles an hour, yet returns almost twice the fuel economy of the old Stager. How are those rose-tinted specs looking now? Taking weight out of the 208, reducing frictional losses in the drivetrain, improving the aerodynamics and making wise choices around turbocharger efficiency and overall gearing has made the 208 GTi make its mark as one of the most fuel-efficient cars in its class. It could go a stage further, but Peugeot has, somewhat curiously, decided not to fit this car with a fuel-saving stop-start system. The combined cycle fuel return is 47.9 miles to the gallon, which, would you believe, is exactly the same figure as you'll get from rival Ford Fiesta ST and Seat Ibiza Cupra models, right down to the decimal point. It's about 10% better than you'll get from a Renault Sport Clio 200, due perhaps to the fact that that car is 44 kilograms heavier. The Clio also lags a little behind the Peugeot when it comes to CO2, delivering 144 grams per kilometre compared to this 208 GTi's 139 grams per kilometre. Crucially, that small advantage is enough to put this car into a lower tax bracket. This 208's figure is also 32 grams per kilometre better than that of its 207 GTi predecessor. Insurance is rated at Group 30, which again is about par for the course, and residual values are excellent. After 3 years and 36,000 miles, industry experts Fleet News reckon your 208 GTi will be worth around £8,500, about the same as a Renault Sport Clio 200, but around 10% more than a Ford Fiesta ST, and around 20% more than a Seat Ibiza Cupra. In terms of pence per mile running costs, you'd expect the cheaper Ford to lead the class, but this Peugeot is next best in the pecking order, delivering 49.88 pence per mile, a useful advantage over the Clio, 52.98 pence per mile, and the Seat, 53.68 pence per mile. The Peugeot's helped by the fact that it has 20,000 mile service intervals, in contrast to a class norm of between 10,000 and 12,000 miles. Peugeot will never build a true spiritual successor to the 205 GTi. Times have changed, and the things that made that car great, such as its sub 900 kilogram weight and spiky handling, just won't pass safety legislation and quality demands these days. Upset? Toughen up. The game's changed, and changed for the better. The appeal of disappearing backwards through a hedge palls somewhat with age. So let's move into the here and now and cast a final spotlight on this 208 GTi, a car that's that rarest of things. A hot hatch with maturity, subtlety and versatility. One that blends fun with responsibility. This might not be immediately apparent when you first clap eyes on it. All the red and chrome bits lead you to expect a bit of a handful, but it's anything but. This thing doesn't drive like a pocket roller skate. It's fun, yes, but in a more grown-up way. There's not that ADHD persistence of the most focused cars in its class. So, does that mean that rivals like Ford's Fiesta ST and the Renault Sport Clio 200 will be more fun around a racetrack? In all likelihood, yes. But day in, day out, I can see a significant number of potential purchasers preferring to take this Peugeot, provided that they've taken the trouble to delve a bit deeper into what it offers. Do that if you're browsing in this segment. This 208 GTi will reward you for it. If you suspect that you might have grown out of a hot hatch and rue that fact, then this is the car for you. It's a hot hatch with all the nagging edginess smoothed away. And you know what? That makes this car a rather lovely thing.